Hi everyone, I'm Michael Painter. Welcome to this session. We're so glad to have you here. And I'm actually loving that it's just an intimate session. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation from Oklahoma, and I have some slides, so I probably should click through that. That's our session. That's me. That's me. That's Oklahoma, near where my mom lives in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma is one of the 50 states. It's in the lower 48. It's right in the middle of the country. It was formerly Indian territory, and my family got there from my mom's side from forced removal by the United States government from North Carolina to Oklahoma. But that's where I grew up. And that's my family. In the middle is my uncle. I got my middle name from him, Wayne. And that's my mom. To the left, he's 94. My mom's 90. Those are my brothers and sisters. They're in a small house in northeastern Oklahoma on land that he has lived on for many, many years, along with a full compound of brothers and sisters there as well. And to the left is another family member of mine. It's a cherry tree, a 100-year-old cherry tree at our house in Princeton Junction, New Jersey, that we lost this year. From a freakish series of freakish snowstorms, really badly damaged the tree, and it died. I have work. So I work at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I'm a senior program officer there. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the largest foundation in the United States focused on improving the health of people living in the United States. And we work to help build a healthier, better future so everyone living in the United States can partake in that, so that everyone would have a fair and just opportunity to have that kind of better, healthier future. We're very, very passionate about building that future for everyone. And so we look anywhere we can in the United States, all over the place, for ideas to help build that healthy future, and across the world. This particular picture is a recent picture from New Zealand. That's a special place, a special river, and there are special people there. That's the Whanganui River, and I'm hoping you'll hear a little bit more about that shortly from our guests. The most important thing, though, for today is this is about these guys. These are amazing Indigenous entrepreneurs from across the United States, and the United States and New Zealand, actually, a little bit. You'll hear it momentarily. Our fellows are Crystal Echohawk, Alina Kawe, Lillian Hill, and you met Erik Brodt just a minute ago. What we're going to do today is meet them, and then we're going to have a conversation. And then we're going to sort of move out to have you guys do some reflection, and then we're going to hear from you. And we have some roaming mics and whatnot, but we'll get there in a minute. So be patient and let this sort of transpire. So let's move on to Crystal and let you introduce yourself, and then we'll just move on down the line.
Great. Thank you. Put myself on timer. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This feels really incredible to be here. As Mike introduced me, my name is Crystal Echohawk. I'm a dual citizen. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation, which is in Oklahoma. Our original homelands were in Nebraska and Kansas before we were forcibly marched down into Oklahoma. And I'm also a citizen of the United States. My Pawnee name is Kiharu Hatawa, which means lights in the room woman. So I'm just going to take you through, see, I told you. I was just talking to the tech guys that I always have problems with technology. And take you a little bit through my work, which really, I have been a lifelong activist for Native peoples. I've grown up in an activist family. And one thing is sort of we all as Native peoples, we're really grounded in our creation stories and where we come from. And really the creation story around my work has been, I've been an advocate for my entire life and stand on the shoulders of generations of Native advocates, and yet we find it so difficult to be seen and to be heard. And oftentimes we are the only Native people in the room. I mean, Mike's the only Native person in the entire Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for example. And it was really like, how do we change that dynamic? And so really it was about looking at understanding what is at the root of this invisibility? What is at the root of Native peoples and Indigenous peoples not being taken seriously? In fact, my understanding is we're amongst the first groups to ever really come to Skoll. I think there's been, different individuals that have come, but this is the first time ever. So I really want to acknowledge and thank the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for that. So it's really about how do we make the invisible visible in terms of Indigenous people. So just looking at this graphic here, Indigenous people in terms of the global population represent 1.5 billion people. So we're the second largest population within the world. And within the Americas, that population is over 600 million. So we're actually the largest, right? And then you look at, in terms of our representation, in terms of the biosphere and sort of the important role that Indigenous peoples within the world play as stewards. But yet, you know, as we then kind of transition into looking at representation, which is a lot of the work that I do, you know, we look at the United States, good or bad, you know, exports 80% of the world's media, right? And so it's so powerful. But yet when we think about representation of populations, you look at those statistics and see that Native peoples are almost nearly invisible when you look at sort of representation within TV and film and within media, even though we're the second largest population in the world. And why is that? And so over the course of 2 years, we funded I led a project called Reclaiming Native Truth, which was really about mapping what are the perceptions within the United States about Native peoples, what do Americans know or don't know about Native peoples and why? And also to look at key institutions and how those key institutions relate to Native peoples. And what we found is that the invisibility of Native peoples is very much institutionalized within systems across the country within media, K through 12, and entertainment. And what we found really is the findings in our research is that invisibility is the modern form of racism against Native peoples. And so in looking at this graphic as we went through, you know, as I mentioned, you know, we interviewed members of Congress who really said, yes, the invisibility of Native peoples does impact policy. And what we found is upwards to 80% of Americans know little to nothing about Native peoples. 72% rarely encounter information. And I mean, it was really stunning to me when we found that even when you do a Google search, the majority of those images, over 90%, come back and they're antiquated images of Native people. There's no contemporary representations of us within media. And then really be able to start to track about how that affects policy and decisions in courts and decisions in philanthropy in terms of a lack of investment in Native peoples. And so that creates an incredible void, which is filled by stereotypes and racist sports mascots, which are huge in the United States, to sort of these tropes that are really perpetuated in media and entertainment about either we're mystical and magical and talk to stars and do all kinds of wonderful things, or we're these really tragic, you know, alcoholics and poor and downtrodden, and really people not only within the United States, but I think globally have a hard time really seeing us for who we are in 2019. And so I guess one of the final points is that oftentimes we're told, well, you're such a small population that nobody really cares. Nobody's interested in terms of media or entertainment. We're often told in philanthropy, you're too small of a population to really make significant impact. You're statistically insignificant. I'm sure my colleagues here have heard that a number of times. But what we're trying to tell you is we're not statistically insignificant within the global population or within the Americas, or if you're working in media and entertainment or any issue area, what that statistic there shows is actually it's a fallacy. At least in the Americas, in the United States, 78% of people we went out and polled as we began to talk to them said, we actually want to know more. We want to know about these contemporary stories. In our schools, almost 90% of the schools don't teach past 1900. People want to see that change happen, and so our work is really, you know, as we move forward with the new initiative Illuminative, is how do we illuminate contemporary Native peoples today and our voices and our stories and issues, because we truly believe by about changing the story around Native peoples, we can change the future. So, thank you.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alina Kawe. I'm Hyaki from Tucson, Arizona. Our Aboriginal lands are in what is now northern Mexico, and we were initially colonized by the Spanish, followed by the Mexican government, and then due to genocidal policies, fled to what is now California, southern Arizona, and southwestern Texas. This is a picture of the Sonoran Desert where I live. Much of the work that I do, I'm the founder and CEO of Red Star International. And our work focuses on building the capacity of tribal governments and tribal organizations to deliver public health programs and services with the primary aim of improving wellness in our communities. Whoops, I went the wrong way. And the way that we do that is by first and foremost prioritizing Indigenous knowledge. Because of the imposed systems, we often have to go through a process of deconstructing those systems in order to reorganize from an Indigenous perspective. And that requires also a change in mindsets and allows us to think about how we deliver those services within our contemporary context, but in a way that's culturally grounded. 5 years ago, I moved to New Zealand. My husband is Maori of the Ngāti Ranginui and Ngāti Kohanganunu tribes. And through that experience, I've had the opportunity to come from the desert and learn about the sea and to learn about water and the relationship with water. And so initially, when I made the decision to leave, I thought I'll be separated from my family by the ocean, and what I've learned from the Maori and the people of the Pacific is that the ocean is what connects us. And what's significant about these particular images is that my husband sails traditional voyaging canoes around the Pacific and has been very active in the renaissance of traditional practices and the practice of guardianship as voyagers on the ocean, raising awareness of the importance of caring for water. And so this has given me a really unique perspective living amongst another Indigenous community and culture. I can't help but reflect more deeply upon my own culture and community and ways of knowing and ways of transmitting knowledge. And so when I learned about New Zealand in 2017, while I was living there, recognized through the settlement process, through land confiscation, New Zealand's going through a process of resettlement with the Maori tribes. And as part of the settlement, the tribes along the Wanganui River asked for the river to be recognized as having the rights of personhood. And this monumental act is really significant because, one, it prioritizes that Indigenous knowledge. It prioritizes the rights of nature, but it also puts the relationship with the river first and foremost. And they've done that through a shared governance process. And so in that process, they've identified practical ways of using a collaborative process to be, so that everyone is a steward and caretaker of the river. And so through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Global Idea Program, we were able to receive a grant to be able to, through support from that grant, we will be facilitating an international Indigenous exchange between the tribal leaders in New Zealand along the Wanganui River and tribal leaders in Arizona. Because when I reflect back on our rivers in Arizona, and this particular picture is the Colorado River, but in our area, our rivers are now dry. There was a time not more than 50 years ago where the rivers ran all year round. But now we're suffering from extreme drought. The river has been over-allocated for many years, and you can see in the river that how rapidly those levels have decreased. And so I was really fortunate actually to be in the session just before this downstairs around sort of the conversation around Indigenous peoples being part of the solution in terms of going forward and thinking about how we can be better stewards of the land, because much of our decisions prioritizes one group of people over another. And so how do we work together to take care of Mother Earth, because it has the potential not just to affect Indigenous people, even though we contribute the least but are impacted the most by these things, how we can work together for the health of everyone. So, thank you.
Okay. Great. Hello, everybody. I'm going to introduce you in my native language because then I'll feel more comfortable talking to you. Lomatalongwa, ne kawanhoi ne mianhopi matsiwa, ne pipwangwa, ne kekotsmovi epkita, ne halai kyang yansiki. My name's Lillian, and I come from a village called Kekotsmovi, which is on the Hopi ancestral homeland. My tribe itself was not relocated. We still continued to live in 14 villages spread out in northeastern Arizona, and the villages that we live in are villages that we've lived for thousands of years, actually. Our community is one of the, our settlement, the village where I come from, which is called Oraivi, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in North America. And so we are very, we are very privileged to be able to live in our homeland and still have our connection to our place and area there. The work that I am engaged in currently is a little bit new to me because I began working kind of in international work related to organizing around environmental justice issues within my own community. At age 19, I started an organization which is called the Black Mesa Water Coalition, which basically was established to stop the widespread coal mining and water depletion of our territory and our homelands. Within the United States, we have huge issues with the federal government and its development of the United States, sourcing resources, natural resources from indigenous territories. And within my homeland, the Hopi Territory, and also surrounding Navajo territories, we have over 500 unreclaimed uranium mines, and we also have numerous, one of the largest actually coal strip mines, which is on the reservation where I live, which has impacted us in several significant ways. And one of them being that prior to this type of development happening in our territories, our communities were autonomous and we had our own forms of government and our way of governing ourselves and our way of living, and we were a non-monetarized society, so we didn't participate in money at all. And so the U.S. government came in. I'll just do a really quick synopsis, short picture, because it's very important to the work that I do now. So basically, the U.S. government came in with multinational side contracts to access and source coal in this instance and utilize water to slurry coal. They determined a dollar value on those natural resources, and the tribe then became a corporation or a tribal government. But we didn't receive citizenship in the United States until 1946 as Hopi people, and the royalties leases were signed in 1934. And so we became millionaires overnight, which is that our resources, our land itself was being sold, and money was then transferred into a government that was created by the United States government. And we enter a monetarized system which significantly changed our cultural understanding and ways of relating to each other as well in many significant ways. 6 years ago, the coal mine shut down. The leases were not renewed due to political activism and pressure from the organization that I was working with at the time in collaboration with other groups. And so now the tribal government is in an interesting place because economically, the Peabody coal mine, they not only ended leases, but they went bankrupt. So there's a lot of issues associated with economics in my community that we face. And so for myself as a young activist, I felt that it was important to really be within the community there and to find local solutions to the issues that we face in our own community. And those issues are just, there's a lot of issues that we face. And so one of those solutions that I found moving forward is that as Hopi, we are agricultural people. We have developed specific varieties of corn, different types of crops that we've basically engineered over a very long time, our ancestors. And so the farmers themselves continued the farming way of life, and they need a lot of support to do that. And so I founded an institute which is called the Hopi Tetskwa Permaculture Institute to address issues of equity within our communities and to really work with farmers and local landholders to be able to access resources to develop farming and also to develop local markets for their crops and train a new generation of indigenous farmers that are using traditional methods and traditional methodology of Hopi agriculture, and to take pride in that. In conjunction with creating financing around young people in the community and young families to access home ownership as well, but not any home ownership of passive solar, locally designed homes that are off-grid, that harvest rainwater, and that produce food year-round in greenhouses as well. So utilizing different technologies in association with our also cultural values as Indigenous Hopi people. And we're also doing a lot of training on solar, and we also have youth programs where we're training next generation of our youth to be able to be fluent in traditional values in agriculture. And so I'm very happy to be here and to share this work with you all.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Anim buju gakina wia nindodem wabajeshi ningejikaz gnu anandawayanini. So I'm Erik. Brodt is my Christian name, but I'm Ojibwe from northern Minnesota, and I'm from the Pine Marten clan, and it's like our family structure system. And my name translates into brown eagle, one who brings healing to people. And this is a photograph. It's actually the oldest photograph in my family. We have the unique, my wife and I have the unique experience, and maybe some people up here have this experience too, but we are able to find pictures of our relatives in private collections, museum collections, school collections, things like that. And this is actually a photograph of my great-grandma up in what once was considered Dakota territory before the state of North Dakota was formed. And that is when, after she had been removed from her home and was being trained in the domestic arts in the Catholic sister school program. And so this is when she was out on her practicum, we'll call it, when she was working for a judge in the area to basically clean, do all the cooking, all the sewing, and all the laundry as part of her showing that she could be a good person in society. And so the reason I show this is because it was the educational system that created a lot of challenges that we face. So right here in this picture, this is when my family went from speaking 4 languages down to 1 language, okay? Extended kinship down to a different new system. And so a lot of changes happen from this, and this really isn't that long ago, okay? And so what I do now is I'm a physician at Oregon Health and Science University. I teach young doctors how to take care of patients one day, but then I direct the Northwest Native American Center of Excellence, which aims to increase the number of American and Alaska Native people who are in the physician workforce, as well as better train the future health leaders of tomorrow in Indigenous issues. Okay, so in the U.S., just in general, American Indian people, we live sicker and die younger than everybody else. Lots of stats, but that's it, period. And the thing is it doesn't have to be that way. All of it's preventable, truly preventable. And I think one of the challenges that has resulted in this is that the U.S. medical education and health system isn't inclusive of American Indian or Alaska Native voice. And so what we do is we have programming to try and increase the voice of American Indians and Alaska Natives who are becoming physicians, who can become leaders, who can go and work in a community, and some go back and work in tribal communities. And then what happens is you get a Native doc working in a tribal community. They stay longer than the contract doctors that they get, and each Native doc you bring to a community generates 23 new jobs, okay? Then kids start seeing a Native doc in the clinic. They start imagining who they could become one day. And so it turns into this cycle of both economic development, identity development, and hopefully moving towards health and wellness. Before we started the center at all, just like coming here today asking for permission, before we started the center at OHSU, I went and asked permission from the tribes first. I didn't ask a funder, I didn't ask the government, I didn't ask my school, but I went to the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, which is run, owned, and operated by the 43 tribes of Pacific Northwest. And I talked to them, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And then they're our partners now in the work that we do. And so that was the 43 tribes. This is a slide of what I consider the pathway to becoming a health professional. And we've used the word pipeline a lot here, but I learned in speaking to a community in 2012, Bad River Indian Reservation, northern Wisconsin. I went in and I talked about building an educational pipeline. And an elder, she stood up and she said, we don't want any more pipelines in our communities. And I said, perfect, let's build a pathway to becoming physicians and nurses. And this is the model that we use. And it's kind of separated up into pre-college, college, right before someone goes into medical school or becoming a health professional, and then as a health professional themselves. And I founded this all on some presumptions that I hear too often. And what I'll tell you is the antithesis to those things, because I don't believe them. I believe in the positive thing about this. And I also don't like to speak those negative phrases that I hear a lot, because I think there's power in words. And so I believe Native youth are curious, and I believe that they're talented, okay? I believe that Native American college students are interested and can succeed in science, technology, education, math, and medicine. I believe that American Indians make outstanding applicants to health professional schools, and I believe that American Indians and Alaska Natives can be our health leaders of tomorrow. All those things, I hear the opposite of that all the time. And so we've built our model around kind of a strength-based deal to work through that system. And one specific example of what we're doing, in the US, there's been tremendous efforts to diversify the US health workforce since 1980. I'm talking millions and millions and millions of dollars have been pumped in to try and diversify the US health workforce. The only group of people who are not experiencing an increase, who are actually experiencing a decrease, are American Indians and Alaska Natives. Last year, there were 39 American Indians who went to medical school in the US, out of 22,000 seats. In 1980, there were 60. Think about that. All this money going in to try and diversify the US workforce, yet we're not benefiting from it. And it's a system problem, okay? And so this right here is one of our answers at OHSU to the system. And so what we do is we identify American Indians last names who applied to medical school but weren't successful getting in. So they had to apply, they had to try again, but they weren't successful. But they're right on the cusp. And we started a 10-month program where you apply, interview, you get accepted. You complete the program, you are guaranteed conditional acceptance to OHSU School of Medicine. Completely changes the game, because these are 10 students who would not have been offered seats in school, 10 students who got turned away, and in effect, one program. This next fall, if the 7 students who are in the path that gets conditional acceptance, one program increases the number of American Indians in the US medical school system by 20%. One program doing that. So that's kind of like our way of getting around the challenges in the system that exists. Now I'll turn over to you guys.
Great, thanks. So, thanks, we could just put that there. So that's our Skoll World Forum Fellows, Indigenous entrepreneurs. So an incredible group of people. Great. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation. Can we learn just a little bit about you guys? And we're not going to do too much yet, but we will in a minute. Can you raise your hand if you've ever worked with Indigenous people? Terrific. Okay, great, wonderful, good. So that's who we're talking to. Okay, great, perfect. So we have some questions, and let's just start through here. So how you guys, any of you can sort of take this up, but how does your unique perspective that you just described, each one of these was related but very different and unique, how does that inform who you are? We got a little bit of an understanding of that, but also the work you do, would you say?
I'll kick it off. I mean, you know, in terms of a fully dimensionalized, you know, complex person, but I think, you know, one of the things that really informs me is, like, again, I stand on the shoulders of so many, you know, of my relatives and our Indigenous relatives who have really fought remarkable battles over time, over centuries, but, you know, really within the, you know, 20th and now 21st century. So really inspired by that, but inspired as a mother. You know, my daughter has really struggled with mental health issues and has been relentlessly bullied her entire life because I had the audacity to give her an Indian name. Her name is Wichakbiwiya. And was literally told, like, she was being bullied by classmates and by teachers, just making fun of her in front of class, like, what kind of name is this? I'm not even going to try to pronounce this. I mean, it was just sort of remarkable what was happening in her classrooms. And I remember walking in to go talk to the principal, and the principal said, "This is your fault because you gave her that name, and you should give her an English name." And this is in Boulder, Colorado, supposedly, you know, liberal bubble in Colorado, and that's just one story of how much our young people feel so bullied, so dehumanized. And I think it's just, you know, it was really like enough is enough. And I think it's those experiences that it's deeply personal. You know, in our research, we found that barely 60% of Americans think that we're fully human. And we see that play out in all of our work in different ways. And so enough is enough. And I think, you know, it's those very deeply personal experiences that go way back to what's happening right now that has really kind of informed the work I do, and how much I'm absolutely blown away and inspired by the wonderful, powerful solutions and things that are happening in our communities that need to be really uplifted and illuminated. So.
Anybody else want to grab that?
Yeah, I think I can go next. I think, you know, for myself, you know, as an Indigenous person growing up in a very rural community, my community is very rural, and meaning that I grew up kind of in a different way than most people in my, I guess the young ones that are coming up now are growing up a little bit differently in that I was, in the time when I was a child, electricity wasn't in the community where I lived, or even, I guess, modern sanitation and water as we have today within the community. So I grew up, you know, hauling water without electricity. You know, I wasn't scared of the dark, you know, I knew different things. So I grew up very differently. My parents, you know, my father was a subsistence hunter, so a lot of the food that we ate was around from our region itself. I remember when I was probably about 7 years old, going to Albuquerque, New Mexico to visit my grandma, who had relocated there when she was younger and had gone into a grocery store for the first time. And I remember that very distinctly because I had never seen food packaged and looking the way it looked. I remember I was just like amazed at everything, you know, and I was like, where did they get all this food? So I had all these questions, and in retrospect, I think back to that time, and I think, gosh, you know, as an Indigenous person, you know, living from a way of life and a way of thinking that is so different from regular society, and going through schooling and kind of looking at this idea of assimilation and conformity into Western society is it's very difficult for me sometimes as an adult. And I have children too, and they're living a very different life too than I lived growing up. So I think the change in mentality, the change in ideals is really is interesting to me. And from my perspective, the work that I do now has great reverence and respect for a very simple way of life, and a way of life that that respects and honors the relationship between people and the natural world, and not only honoring and respecting, but acknowledgement of spirituality within the context of nature. And so for me, you know, for my people, we talk about water as if it's alive, as if it's a female being, and we protect it. And so growing up, and we also have spiritual practices that are embedded in our culture that inform us that humans are not alone in this world. There are spiritual forces that are at work helping us, and we have direct connections to them. So living in this world that is different, and then coming into and being educated in the Western world of economics and global capitalism, looking at colonization that has occurred and why, and continuing to see that happen and play out in our modern economic system globally is just, it's crazy, you know. And I think in some ways I see a sociopathic behavior being played out globally in that, you know, the land itself is just being so, you know, degraded and taken for granted and exploited. And I think that is because of a mentality of greed, of wealth. In this conference itself, I've been really observant, and anywhere I go, I observe. And so I think that within the work that I do is not only informed by being simple and not having a lot growing up, but also looking at the great wealth that has been accumulated on the backs of our own people as Indigenous people, and having to live in communities that can't drink the water because the water has been heavily contaminated with arsenic and uranium mining. So going through very hard conditions as Indigenous people, but before those companies, multinationals came and took things and made all this money, our people had some of the freshest water in the world. Our springs were just so pristine. The land itself gave more than what it gives now. And so I really see a connection between that and a very stark contrast to this idea of inequality and inequity, because I live with it on a daily basis at home, and I see the direct impacts of colonization. So when we talk about decolonization as well, we have to look and have people at the table who are directly from communities that have been impacted by, you know, all of these things. And earlier I was in a session about how to rewrite the rules for economics. You know, all of the people there were highly educated individuals who probably don't know what it feels like to go and haul water for themselves. They don't know what it feels like to live on the other spectrum of economics, the ecological devastation of economics, you know. So it's just very interesting, and that informs my perspective as an Indigenous person, not only understanding the world that we live in, but also trying to reimagine a different world too, and trying to bring young people along in that process to really think critically and to understand what a reimagined world would look like, and not only understand, but to express it in the way that we develop ourselves as Indigenous people, because we are very undeveloped in a lot of ways, which meaning that, you know, the outside world sees our communities as being very impoverished, which in a lot of ways they are, but there's a lot of opportunity there as well. But if we're not using Indigenous values, Indigenous ways of respect for the land and ourselves, then we're continuing to perpetuate this idea of colonization, because we're not using worldviews, we're not having respect for that. So I think moving forward, a lot of our communities are, especially the community where I come from and other tribal communities, are really at a place of reckoning history and what's occurred, and also an exciting place because we do have access to education and to resources that could help us move in a certain direction. But as Native people, it's important to not get caught up with the way that the rest of the world is going, and to have a little resistance to that as well. So, yeah.
Either of you guys want to add, or you want to move on to?
Well, I think before I share, I think one of the things I want to acknowledge, because I think it sort of frames everything, is that first and foremost, Indigenous peoples are inherently sovereign and self-determining and self-governing. And in terms of the United States, that sovereignty is recognized in our U.S. Constitution. And so when we think about our work, a lot of times in the U.S., people think of us as being people of color or of minority group, but we're not, because we actually have a unique status that's government to government between our tribes and the U.S. government. And so there's a lot of things that I could share that informed kind of the work that I do, but I want to kind of focus on governance because that's been the area that I've focused on for the last 10 years. And that work actually started coincidentally through funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that went to the National Indian Health Board, where they were first looking at governmental public health. And at that time, they had already been investing along with CDC, and W.K. Kellogg was a big contributor to that, in building the capacity of local and state government to promote and protect the health of the U.S. population. And at that time, in 2009, they were looking at the feasibility of including tribes in that process. And so we got involved in sort of facilitating what that would look like, our tribes functioning as governments, delivering public health programs and services. And what they learned, what we all learned, was that yes, we are. And that actually we've got a lot of strengths and we're doing a lot of really good work. But yet, and so having us at the table when thinking about governmental public health becomes really important, because if we're not included, that's a whole pocket of the population that's being excluded from investments that are being made from foundations, the government, and so on. Because if we're not at the table having conversations with our local and state governments, then essentially what happens is that decisions get made for us, and we're among the most regulated people on the planet. And so how do we, so where we've been focusing is how do we strengthen, one, our governance, but also that authority that we have to function in that government-to-government relationship in planning for our health, and then also with our river exchange in sustaining our rivers and so on and so forth, that also have an impact on health. So I think governance has a really important role and has been very much a part of kind of where we're going in the future, and I think is really critical that people begin to understand and recognize.
I'll just be super quick. For me, it's like deeply personal work. And I don't do this because it'll like advance my career. I'll be able to make a name for myself on stuff. I do it because it's about family and it's about making things better for us. And I think much like those up here, I think we're willing to be really courageous and brave and take some big risks because the stakes are so high if we don't succeed.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn a little bit because you guys are these amazing, powerful voices and entrepreneurs, and each of you doing incredible things. Can you talk about some of the innovative approaches that you're taking to address some of these challenges you sort of highlighted? Erik, you want to start, or since we ended with you?
So I think you know, one thing I didn't highlight up there, but we started a nonprofit called We're Healers, and it utilizes digital media to show American Indian Alaska Native youth who they could be one day. And it's all short vignettes, 2 to 4 minutes, that's told through the perspective of Indigenous health professionals. So if there aren't Indigenous health professionals out there, and American Indian Alaska Native youth don't see Indigenous health professionals, then they can't really imagine themselves like in the future doing that as a job. And so we've utilized that platform to help inspire and connect American Indian Alaska Native youth with opportunities to increase their representation in education and to help kind of foster their dreams and things like that. And we've been doing that project now for, I don't know, like 5-6 years, and it's been really successful and fun. So that's one way.
Just to add on to that, that video series, that incredible storytelling series, informed a really cool project that we did at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation called Your Path to Our Health, where we went in and embedded in various communities and people volunteered their stories that then videographers collected and have shared. So it's great. Thank you for doing that. Anybody else?
Yeah, 2 things. So one of the things about the invisibility of Native peoples in the United States is that we're never in the data, and everything's data driven, right? So if you look at the United States, it's typically everything is encouched in black and white, maybe Latino. And there's rarely ever Native American data anywhere. And so that was sort of a big thrust about why we did the Reclaiming Native Truth Project, because we knew we needed data, we needed evidence in order to be seen. So it's the largest public opinion research project ever done about, by, and for Native peoples. You can go to Illuminatives.org and you can download all of our research. And it's really, we published last year, it's really helped to change the conversation about the impact of invisibility. And the impact of, you know, stereotypes and all of these different things, and how they really affect people's lives, their well-being, to policy and a variety of different things. So it's really like how we've used that data to really be seen, and I think that was one really important part of it. But the second part is then really connecting that data with storytelling. And so that's been the kind of innovative piece of, we've begun to launch Illuminative and really think about how do we really make Native peoples visible in this important work and the issues and our voices and our stories, and really humanize that. So it's been a remarkable journey, and I just want to like give a shout out to Erica in the back from Comedy Central and Paramount. You know, we actually have a show partnered up with the comedian Jordan Klepper on Comedy Central, and they read our research. We're like, we want to do one of our shows, and so use this whole thing around invisibility, and his line is, invisibility, you know, is not a superpower. And it really sort of is this incredible journey, because he asked me, he goes, isn't it a superpower? And I was like, no. And he goes on this remarkable journey across Indian country. It's coming out, I think, in May or June. But then, you know, partnering with Erik and her team, I'm really excited that it looks like we're gonna, you know, partner on something around the show Yellowstone, and do sort of maybe a short doc, and to be able to tell Native stories. So it's really remarkable to like take the data and then really look at creatively, you know, also working with comedians and others about how we are really uplifting Native stories and humanizing Native people, to be able to talk also about the, you know, serious issues but opportunities in our communities.
Sure. Let's see. Can you repeat the question?
What are some of the innovative approaches? I mean, you sort of highlighted some in your slides.
Definitely.
But talk a little bit more about
innovative
that.
approaches.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just overloaded you with a bunch of problems and issues that we face in our communities. We have a lot of issues sometimes as Indigenous peoples. And so what excites me the most is that there's a lot of opportunity as well in some of the issues and problems that we face. And as, you know, a permaculture institute, we really try to promote values of a solution-based approaches to what we do and how to accomplish some of the issues that we face. And so we really, the organization that I currently work with strategizes and partners with not only other nonprofits in the region, but also communities and villages, local institutions, other tribes as well, to really try to be part of the Indigenous food movement that's currently occurring throughout the world, but particularly throughout the United States. Indigenous tribes are actually reclaiming health by remembering the traditional foods that were so part of our lives and that really gave us health within our communities. And so within the work that I do now is connecting my own community to kind of a larger global, not only national but global landscape, to highlight farmers within the community, and to highlight the specific landrace varieties of crops that we have within our communities, and to also create markets within our communities. So we have food markets, farmers markets, and we're developing also a cooperative store, which cooperative groceries within our community that actually will be able to work with local farmers and local producers to have traditional food markets within our communities, which is very, very important in where I live, because we are so far away from you know, the nearest grocery stores, and our community is a subsistence-based community as well. So we really want to develop markets and to really build equity in the communities as well. So our organization actually fundraised for a pocket of money to offer a pot of loan financing option for community members to access the financial resources necessary to realize home ownership or to repair homes as well. And so in our communities, we face a lot with building equity because the land is held in trust by the government. So it's important to open up pockets of equity and also education and training around how families can start to build that within their homes. And you'd be surprised on how many young people who are in their 20s and have gone off reservation and have gotten educated. The main reason why they don't come home is because they don't have a home to come home to. A lot of times they don't know what it is like to have their own home. And so part of what we do is to provide financing for leaders within our community and for just family members in general to realize what it means to have a home, but a home that truly reflects the values of a society that we want to build, which is a society that is not dependent on fossil fuels. So the homes that we build are off-grid solar. You know, they have a lot of amazing features to them. They're passive solar. So these homes, in essence, are little pockets that are being building, and really what's important is the model that we're developing can be applied to other tribal communities, and not only the loan financing portion, but we also integrate that with student education so that students within the community learn how to build homes, they learn how to grow food, and then they can also share that with others, but they actually reduce the cost of home ownership because of the volunteer labor that they bring as well. So systems that we're creating and models are very complex, they're very complicated in a sense, but they actually work within an Indigenous context. So I'm currently working on expanding models and working with other tribal nations in regards to local food economy development, as well as housing development too. So the solutions are endless, and I think what's important is that you know, within our communities, that these solutions be led by the community themselves, Indigenous-led groups, because you have a problem really in the U.S. is that groups represent Indigenous communities and they work with communities, but if the solutions are generated from within the community itself and capacities being built, that's really powerful there. And a lot of groups like my group, the group that I work with, and others are really building power and capacity within communities, and I think that's so important to invest in and acknowledge as well. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did was in our work we started learning about the movement of and the creation of public health institutes in the U.S. Many of those are state-based or regional, but also there are national public health institutes that have been created around the world to be able to be a source of support to governmental and non-governmental systems and creating connectivity between government, community, academia, private sector. And so one of the things that we were looking at is, well, what would an Indigenous public health institute look like? Where do we go to do what we do better? What exists for us to create systems change and greater connectivity at a national level amongst tribes, given our diversity and unique needs, but also given our common interests? And we had partnered with the National Network of Public Health Institutes to really explore that. And we learned a lot about both how we organize ourselves, but also the influence that funding has on how we do things. And so in terms of how we organize ourselves, we started realizing that our health systems are quite regionalized, and a lot of that has to do with the regionalization of the Indian Health Service, and in order to facilitate consultation between tribes and the federal government in delivering of health care. But there wasn't really anything that connected us. And when we looked at the work, we realized that most of our programs and services were disease focused. So we had cancer programs, we had diabetes programs, and things that were based on delivering a certain product. But when we looked at the way local and state governments were funded, we learned that much of the funding that they were getting was more about learning how to build their infrastructure and capacity to address chronic disease as a whole. So with us, the money was sort of being put on the problem, and with the local and state government, it was about building capacity to be able to address cross-cutting programs. And so through that, we also learned that our fund-seeking patterns were very much, if it was specifically for American Indian Alaska Natives, then those were the funding mechanisms that our tribes and tribal organizations were pursuing, rather than thinking more broadly. But also when we were talking to funders, they were saying we don't necessarily know how to reach tribes and tribal organizations. And so we started to also hold tribal roundtables and actually speak with the tribes regionally, and speaking with them about what their needs were, what their strengths were, what their needs were, and if there were an Indigenous Public Health Institute, what could it possibly do for them. And what we realized was that some of the same concerns were the same, and there was nothing, there wasn't a mechanism that existed to be able to create that connectivity. So we were really pleased last year to launch and create the first Indigenous Public Health Institute. And it's a national public health institute called 7 Directions, and is now, again, just in its first year of operation, but we're really excited because we've actually got data to show where some of those needs are, where the system opportunities are, and where the gaps are. And so we can work in partnership with the National Network of Public Health Institutes, other public health institutes, but the focus is very much driven by what we heard in terms of the needs of the tribes as well. And so that's been one of the innovative ways that we have looked to create greater connectivity, not just amongst ourselves, but with the larger system in which we are, interacting in.
We're going to transition in just a minute. I want to get this one more question out, and then we're going to ask you guys to sort of talk amongst yourselves just a little bit, and we'll give you some guidance about what we're hoping to do. It'll just be quick, and then we'll come back together and talk more open with more of an exchange a little bit. But can you guys sort of step back and say, what do you think it takes for people to, what do people need to understand if they wanted to meaningfully interact with Indigenous communities? Challenges, promise, potential, barriers, anything you want to put out there?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on just something that Lillian had just said as a point of education, and this is, for the United States, but I'm sure it probably has a global pattern in which, philanthropic dollars going into Native issues is 0.03% of all foundation giving in the United States. But yet, of that, 2/3 of that goes to non-Native organizations serving Native Americans. So only 1/3 of that is really going to Native-led solutions. And so that when we look at, typically when people think about Native Americans, I hear this all the time, like, oh my gosh, you guys are so depressing. Oh, it's too complex. There's like so many things wrong. We don't know what to do. But that's because a lot of the way that funding and investment has gone into Native communities and not really trusting Native people to really have those solutions. And so oftentimes when something doesn't go right, when funders or people are sort of investing in a Native community, it's like, well, what did the Indians do wrong? They screwed up. And it's like, why aren't we looking back on that system and saying, how do things need to be done differently? And that philanthropy or investors or the government, there's that accountability. And so I really think what I would say about in terms of doing that meaningful relationship, it's really one, seeing Indigenous peoples, right, in bringing them in and really looking at the solutions that are inherent within those communities and really seeking out partnerships and really to create that frame of partnership instead of I'm going to save you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to export knowledge onto you, because that's not what's needed. And I think the other thing I would just really encourage, I want to give a shout out, Edgar Villanueva is in the back of the room. If you have not picked up a copy of Decolonizing Wealth, please do so, because that will really begin to really understand how we need to set a new level, a new baseline for engagement with Native communities.
I'll just be brief and say that, we're relational people. And so I think the stronger the relationship that you can foster and build and take the time to learn and understand, I think that's really critical. I think that's really made the difference with different funding and partners that we've had, when they've really taken the time to listen, but then also make changes and see us as being experts as well, and acknowledging that the knowledge that we bring to the table is just as valuable. And how do we take a strengths-based approach, recognizing our strengths, recognizing your strengths, and bringing those together for the betterment, I think is really can have a positive impact.
A real practical tip would be, if you're going to work with Indigenous communities, don't go in assuming nothing has ever been tried before to do something, and just ask, what have you done to try and address this? Or what are you doing right now to try and address this? It's been very helpful for the work that we do.
Yeah, I think as well, to really build a meaningful relationship is really, we have to think long term. We can't think 1 year at a time. We can't think, as philanthropists, I think there's a lot of flaws in philanthropy, and I won't go through all of them. No, let's not. I'm not. Mike's going to cut me off pretty soon. But there, definitely, Edgar Villanueva talked about these things earlier. I don't need to repeat a lot of things, but as far as just from an Indigenous leader within my own community who is actively seeking partners and developing meaningful relationship with partners, not only funders, but other partners that can provide other things besides funding. It's important to establish a relationship that is based on longer term thinking and strategy. And so to really get an idea of what's needed to truly support each other, not only as an organization, but as a community, because Indigenous peoples, we come from communities of people that have really long-term relationships and complex relationships. So, and we're long-term thinkers in that, our ancestors were thinking beyond their generation already. And so for myself, that's what I like to think is long-term. How do we set up structures, policies, laws, or even models that can be long-lasting and that can be also not only replicated, but can be changed over time. And in order to do that, we need long-term support in that. A startup grant is very helpful and important, but also it's important to connect to resources that may be out there that we may be missing, or partnerships that we may not see. So I think events like this are very important to pull in Indigenous peoples and communities that are underrepresented, because there are a lot of innovative ideas, solutions, and there's a lot of work that's already being done within our communities. So long-term thinking is important to establish relationship.
Fantastic. So now we want to have a conversation with you guys and sort of pivot out here a little bit and sort of widen the circle, do some relations. So what we want to do first is have you guys sort of turn to your neighbor, or 2 or 3 of you, and just start a conversation there about, why did you come to this workshop? It could be, well, I just wandered down the hall and I came in, or, just like, why did you come here? And have that conversation for just a little bit, and then we'll come back in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to ask you another question. So pair off and shake hands. And I know it's awful. The introverts don't want to do this, but we have a couple microphones, and I'm hoping you guys are awesome Skoll World Forum people. So yeah, here's the first reflection. Let's go. Hey.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself? And yeah.
Hi, my name is Aaron Pereira. I also just want to say thank you for what you all shared. So one thing that I'm kind of curious about.
First of all, reflection of what you guys talked about, and then a question.
So the question is related to the reflection.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, great.
So one of the things that we're curious about, and so this is the question and reflection at the same time, is to what extent are you also documenting traditional Native American medical practices, and also valuing that worldview, that system of looking at the body, the kinds of treatments? Because one of the things that I find kind of interesting sometimes is, and I say this also looking at the Indian context for us with Ayurvedic medicine, or Tibetan context with the Tibetan medical context as well, somehow all of these other medical systems have been looked down on to some extent, and there's a huge amount of value in them, and sometimes oftentimes undiscovered treasures that don't exist in the Western context, in a way that also deeply reflect our cultural values. So I'm curious about that thread as well, and how you are also enabling or working on that.
Let's hold that and get some more reflections. More reflections, please. Don't make me call on you.
have a comment, just a comment. I loved hearing about that 90% of the Earth's biosphere is protected by indigenous people. It reminds me of the authenticity of the stories that we have of the land, of the traditional culture that's related to the land, the practices around that, which are the most truthful stories that are told and that we've forgotten over time, or that have been repressed over time. So I really appreciated hearing about that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Others? A couple more. Yes.
Hi, I'm an Indian who come from India. So yeah. So I was quite impressed with, particularly Lillian, the kind of work that is going on in in your area where you're so far away from the main development and the main society, but still managing to stay relevant and managing to stay in connection, but still practicing your worldviews and all of that. So yeah, but all of you are doing really good work. This in particular mainly because that's something that the kind of work that I do is also related to environment. So can I ask the question now, or should I?
You can ask it, and I'll come back. I'm taking reflections, but I'll come back. I'm going to do questions in a minute. If you want to hold it, I'll come right back to you. I promise. Right.
Thanks.
I'm in the same boat as you. I have reflection, and I'll I'll save for my question, but just to say, so my name is Tim Kermode. I'm from Victoria, British Columbia. I wear two hats. I'm the founder of a charity that for 20 years have been providing sort of nature-based programs for kids and families with barriers, and we do have a very much a strong Indigenous program in partnership with a lot of the local. And we're building a brand new $15 million facility where we're really trying to incorporate Indigenous perspectives on how to make this an educational place for all people. So that's one thing. The other one is about 5 years ago, have had the opportunity to wear the hat for a private family foundation. And one of our big investments was remote communities of British Columbia, health and wellness. And it wasn't Indigenous focused, but it's turned out to be Indigenous focused. And we have funded to the tune of about $20 million to date a variety of cultural and health centers, health and wellness centers, cultural camps. And we've really done it with Indigenous-led organizations and gone in and just provided the funding necessary to see these things through. And really what we've learned is we say, you tell us what you want this funding to go towards and tell us the impact it's going to make. And we've found out that really the one thing we're measuring most here is hope for these communities to have this funding to show what's possible. So I just want to say I resonated with a lot of what you said. I think we're doing a lot of things right. We're trying to keep it simple, but there's a question I have later for one of the complications that we have run into lately, and I'd love to get your perspective on how to steer through some of those challenges, because we have a lot more funding we'd like to do, and I think it's got real potential.
Terrific.
There
Thanks.
you go.
One, I saw a hand here. You ready? Yeah, you've got a microphone. Yeah. I keep forgetting. Please say your name so we know you.
My name's Jessica, and I'm like Tim. I'm Canadian, and so I'm again struck by the differences. And I guess I wanted to offer just my reflection to my colleague here was a lot about almost the hope that I have, in that when I was in school, I never learned about the residential school system. I didn't learn about the history of colonization that we have in Canada, but my son, since kindergarten, that has been a part of his experience. And there are amazing Indigenous music artists who are very well known and celebrated in Canada. There are just so much more visibility, and we've got a long way to go, as I'm sure many of my Canadian colleagues would attest to, but just that I've seen a change, and someone who works mostly with Americans reminded me of as an ally, the role that I have to continue to work with my colleagues to help them see what's invisible. So thank you what you shared.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, there we go. Introduce.
I'm Jennifer from the Philippines.
Hi.
From, an Indigenous people in the Philippines, and it's very nice. It's great for me to see other Indigenous persons because, it's rare for me to go to a gathering where, there's very few of us, and I'm the only Filipino here. It's very strange, but yeah, one of my reflections when listening to you is that it's amazing how advanced you are compared to a lot of the indigenous peoples in the developing world. And it would be great for us to learn from your experience. I mean, this whole concept of having a National Institute on Public Health, this is something that we dream about in the Philippines, but it would be great to learn from you how you went about creating that institute.
Fantastic, great. So now let's shift to those questions. And Aaron had one. Anybody? And I'll come back to you, Tim. Tim, was it? Yep. Anybody want to take Aaron's question? Yeah.
For that. So there was a study done. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Group Health Corporation or Group Health. It was a health system. It is a health system in the Pacific Northwest, and they did a study on patients that were in their urban center who were American Indian Alaska Native, and they asked them like, what's the frequency of traditional medicine that you use? And it was over 70% of the patients were using traditional medicines. And the reason why they did this was because the system wasn't asking those questions to start with at all, completely ignoring the fact that 70+% of the patients in this private paying healthcare system, where there are indigenous people that are in it because it's Seattle, okay, we're still practicing things that the providers had zero knowledge of, okay? And I think that, from the work that I do right now, a lot of what we do at OHSU around indigenous medicines and indigenous foods is with students who are indigenous themselves, and we work with them in a way that is comfortable for what they want to share. So the challenge with, like how you said that there's treasures in these teachings, we know that, and we've seen how it's been exploited. And so we're probably not going to write it down, and we're probably not going to always share it. And so a lot of these teachings are actually passed down through, like oral, lived things. I was lucky enough to go home and to live for over a summer with like the traditional person in a very isolated, remote Ojibwe community in Minnesota. And it was amazing because just like how he taught stuff was so different. It wasn't just like, hey, read this thing about this. It was, whoever showed up, whatever time of day they showed up, he would teach me kind of what was going on with that. But it's not something that we will at least I won't write in a book and share like that. Yeah. But
can I share something? So our tribe actually has a traditional healing program within the health department. And so I mentioned in my introduction how our people are on both sides of the US and Mexico border. And so when we talk about Trump's wall, we're also talking about a wall where traditional healers are coming up from Mexico and providing those traditional healing services in our community. And it's a really important program because there's huge mistrust of the health system in general. And so people don't go to the doctor, but they will go to a traditional healer. And so there are a lot of ways in which that happens. There's that example, but there are actually formal structural things that tribes are doing to be able to provide traditional healing also as a link to our healthcare as well. So how the tribe documents those things, it probably doesn't for the reasons already shared, but there's a lot of different examples in how tribes are working with the healers within the community.
And it's important for our trainees to learn about these things because there are real side effects between the medicines that one might be taking and the practices that they do. And so more of what we try and do is to teach students how to be comfortable asking the questions to even broach the topic, just because there can be real consequences for not asking the questions.
I will say, to point out, because they are so protected, because our traditional knowledge and ways has been so extracted and exploited over time. But I also know that there's a number of indigenous people, like food is medicine, and really that healing power of it. And there's increasingly Native people who've been working in and around traditional foods that are really starting to look at the science behind it and sort of connecting the science with that to really make a case for preservation and more access to these traditional foods and their sort of healing powers, so to speak. Up in the Northwest, I know Valerie Seagrass, who's from Muckleshoot, and others are really starting to look at how make that knowledge more widely available, because they're trying to actually advocate to the United States government that some of these foods should start to be incorporated in feeding programs and other types of things because of their medicinal qualities. So there's more scholarship that's starting to happen on that.
Tim, and then Naveen had a question.
Yeah. So going back to my question was, okay, sorry, thank you. It's under the theme of collaboration, and I'm going to call it governance readiness. So, two perspectives. So we fund an organization. It's a Healthsick youth, Healthsick community up on the North Shore, up in the north, the Great Bear Rainforest. It's called Cuck Society. A great example of an organization or of a community that really has incorporated nature and the land and their practices to create not just economy and jobs, but also healing within their community. In fact, their suicide rates, I think, have dropped by about 95% based on leadership within the community. And it's being recognized across Canada and Global Mail, et cetera. So we always use an example because we have funded largely quietly behind the scenes a lot of these things, and we do it quietly and honestly. We just want to give it and see it go to work. I say that because secondly, all these other communities that we've worked with, and there's also a history, just to say that, there's this laziness. I think I've heard it with philanthropists too, like, oh, they waste money, they don't know how to spend money properly, there's corruption within these communities. And I think there's corruption all around the place, but I think it's just more prevalent when someone makes a small mistake in these communities. It becomes a huge, huge issue, which I disagree with. So the two things I say is, or ask is, one, we've tried to encourage other communities to say, go and see the Healthsick community and learn from them and what they're doing. Some of these communities have a strong history of warfare and hate towards each other that really they do not want to talk to each other. And I don't try to push it, I'm just saying, and I don't know how to go around that because I think there'd be a really great learning opportunity. But then the second thing is, in two communities that we have funded, we're funding 2 health and wellness centers to the tune of about $5 million. All came from the community, the elders, and the First Nations Health Authority. So we in the province of British Columbia have literally the first First Nations Health Authority. There's nothing like that in other provinces currently today. But what happened was, we got in there and we found out that elected council didn't see eye to eye with elders, didn't see eye to eye with the community, and all of a sudden now we've got legal battles happening between elders and communities where they're bringing in lawyers to see this funding come through. So I always trust what people tell us, and these things have come up. So how do you, I guess the question is, what's some of the things I might want to take into practice around governance readiness when we go into these places, and how to understand it a bit more? So maybe that's always going to happen, but I want to see these things through for these communities. We want to give this money, and we just want to make sure it's going to the right places. So those my 2 questions is, how do I understand that better, and how do I encourage collaboration without, again, I'm just here to encourage it. I don't want to push anything. I just really let these communities do what they need to do. So I hope
either one of those. Any Hopi perspective?
How many First Nations people does your foundation or organization employ right now?
We're only funding organizations, so I literally give, so none within our organization.
Okay.
Within this foundation, it's just me giving money away.
You're the only person in
here?
Okay.
Yes.
I guess one of my things, it just really depends. I mean, if you're funding a sovereign nation, you really just need to listen and follow that government. I mean, I think sometimes the mistakes that my other hat I wear is I advise funders a lot and help them think about strategies. And I think the one thing, and I think this isn't just applicable to Native communities or Indigenous communities, I think across the board, when you start to kind of, like, we all want everybody to get along and collaborate, right? We really want that. But community is complicated, right? And when we're talking about some of the issues and things that are, whether they're issues we're trying to address or things that we're trying to build, we're talking, there's layers and layers of things that have happened in that particular community, trauma, and I mean, deep, deep things. And so you are going to have things kind of come up into community. And I just think that the best thing that funders can do is just sort of step back and let community figure that out for themselves. And I know, and this isn't totally applicable to your situation, but I'm sure we've all been into it. It's like, oh my gosh, hey Crystal, you're Native, Eric's Native, you guys should just go work together because you're both Native. And we're like, well, we do really like different things, and, So, I mean, I just think it's always like, you just really, as much as we want to force, because we have the best of intentions around that kind of work, I think it's really stepping back and letting the community lead, which sometimes means that community is going to misstep. And that's not just an Indigenous thing. That doesn't matter, you're purple, green, white, whatever. I mean, it's human nature to make mistakes and to have complexities, especially when you're really doing big audacious things around change. So I think it's sometimes not being afraid for things to get messy or to go wrong.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Great. Naveen, right here. Yeah.
So yeah, I had one question, which was, probably for the panel. Anyone can go for it, and one specifically for you, Lillian. So the first question I had was, in a lot of places, like I work in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is again an extremely problematic place in terms of, indigenous communities, and colonization is there by Indians, so politically by Indian settlers who've come and colonized those islands. So in places like that, when we work with indigenous communities, the challenge we see is with the younger generation, their aspirations, and there's this huge cultural colonization of sort, or cultural violence of sort, which comes in various ways, media, phones, all kinds of ways, and it's very difficult to get the young demography to kind of, see the values that the elders see within their own communities, or to kind of, so they're in a space where they really do not know how to kind of assimilate with the main, with the general world, but they also don't want to let go of their roots. So they pretty much stuck with a younger demography who kind of are conflicted in between, all these. So are there experiences from your work with youngsters that could, give some insight? I can also have conversations later on as well. But the other question I had for you, Lillian, is, specifically we work on environmental issues, and one of the major challenges has been with other environmental organizations who work in the sector. There's a very Western, very urbanized view of how to go about environmental conservation is by removing people and protecting those, like the Yellowstone example in the US. So, and quite often it leads to more, it doesn't help the environment, neither does it help the communities, and there's a lot of human rights kind of violation happening around that. So, is there anything that, from experiences in your side of the world that, and in India it's becoming a huge problem right now. There are about nearly 2 million people evicted. I mean, the Supreme Court has given an order to evict close to 2 million people from the forest. So, yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to address the youth issue first, and then I can jump into that question too. You guys want to comment?
About your videos, or?
Can you ask the youth question real specifically?
So are you just wondering how we're engaging youth in our work? Is that?
Yeah, how do you, are there conflicts within the youth themselves? Like, do they have conflicts in terms of, I am, say, a Karen tribal, and this is what my roots are, but hey, there's the cool world, they go and engage in jobs outside, beyond their communities, right? So when they go and get exposed to all these, and this is a place where there's a lot of tourist influx, right? So so they kind of see a different world and aspire to kind of, be part of that world, and they're conflicted. So, do you have situations?
So one thing that we're doing is we're taking some very traditional practices and we're translating them into very contemporary settings. So one thing that happens in our communities is you have the concept of auntie. Okay, so your auntie is the person you go to for advice about things. Okay, and so what we have done is we've got this person who is Ask Auntie, who is like a real person who you can send or text questions to, and then Auntie every week will respond to those questions to the youth. And so we operated with the Northwest Portland Area Health Board. They've got this program called We Are Native, and we partner with them, and we utilize texting like you wouldn't believe. So like we run surveys, we recruit, conduct an intervention, and evaluate that intervention all through texting. And like our evaluations have like over 90% response rates, right? I mean, think about that. You're like, your capture rate is pretty high. But it's like we use traditional concepts, but then we convert it into a contemporary medium. So that's like one way that we've done it.
Cool.
I think for the work that I'm engaged in, a lot of our social media platform, we use social media platforms, and we do, kind of share the work that we're doing as well, and create marketing within our own community. So we actually work with Indigenous youth and young adults who are interested in graphic design. We pair them with mentors, and that because young people are so fluent in the language of technology, it's really amazing. And so a lot of young people in our communities, once they learn how, not only they already know how to use technology a lot of times, but once their game is upped a little bit more, they actually create. They're so creative in creating marketing and using social media. They're very fluent. Once they realize they can use that for good, for change, it really opens up a lot of doors to them. And even schooling, college, we do have kids from students from our communities who go to college, but a lot of times they don't know what they're going to do after. They don't have an incentive to keep going, and they want to come home. And so what we do is provide internships for college students who are Hopi students, going to college throughout the nation. We provide internships for them to come home, work with us for the summer. We give them scholarships. We also help them out with stipends every month for their living, accommodations and arrangements that they have. And then we find that a lot of these young people who we've worked with over the past 5 years have actually changed their major and have really looked into sciences, agricultural sciences, environmental sciences, forestry, ecosystem management. So they're getting more interested in ecology itself, and really learning how they can apply their studies into a real world situation, which is back home, and which is where we need a lot of our young people to be invested in our own communities. And that's how they find their identity too, is that, okay, well, I don't have to go to school and become a white person or to become somebody I'm not. I can actually go to school, function as a normally functioning Indigenous person, and I can get education, and I can apply that to my own community, which is really exciting for a lot of young people. Like for myself, I went, left a very traditional community, went to school, and immediately stepped back into my own community to create my own job, to create jobs for others in my community, and to realize hope in a community. So I think it's very important to engage young people in this work, because otherwise, it's very hard for them to overcome some of those obstacles with identity.
Fantastic. So we're going to adjourn here and continue our conversation for those of you who want with some refreshments next door. So please join us.